I love how social media allows us to see news that we typically wouldn't see on mainstream media. Mainstream media does not deliver all of this news. So this is from native news underscore net. So they put out a tweet that said a new federal report recommends that the U.S. government strengthen ties with countries that share similar histories of indigenous child removal as a key step in healing from 2 centuries of destructive Indian boarding school policies. A couple of years ago, I actually read up on the history of how they used to strip children away from their parents. It was called Education for Extinction, or the Extinction Through Education, or something like that. And it was really like they were snatching kids to erase their history, their culture. And that is what they did when they stripped these kids and took them off to these boarding schools. So here's the article. This is the first page. And here is the title page if you want to look it up. Okay, so let's get into the article. Last week, the U.S. Department of the Interior released its second and final report in its 3-year investigation into the traumatic and violent legacy of Indian boarding schools that the U.S. government operated through the 1800s and 1900s. The report suggests that international cooperation with countries like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, nations that also engaged in similar efforts, could help the U.S. develop effective strategies for healing and redress. From 1819 until 1969, the United States forcibly assimilated Native youth by systematically removing them from their homes and sending them to one of at least 417 documented boarding schools across the country. The investigation found that at least 18,624 students entered these schools, where they experienced rampant physical, sexual, in emotional abuse, disease, malnourishment, overcrowding, and lack of health care. At least 973 students died and were buried in marked and unmarked graves at the schools, far from their families and Native communities. Can you imagine the parents of these children? They had no choices. These people came in and just took their kids. But this is America, and a lot of things in our history of this country goes unnoticed, untalked about, because certain people write the history, so they erase and whitewash where they were the villains in the story. Although the United States pioneered policies that led to indigenous child removal policies, it has been the last to reckon with its history compared to its counterparts. In 2021, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, Laguna Pueblo, launched the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative with the goals of identifying boarding school locations, burial sites, and the names and tribal affiliations of children interred at each location. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States derive from the British Empire and maintain English common law systems, the BIA's recent report notes. The 4 countries are distinct because they have political and legal relationships with Indigenous peoples based on the founding national documents, centuries-old judicial decisions, and legislative and executive actions and instruments, unlike other countries that base official interactions with Indigenous people on human rights or non-binding principles. Volume 2 of the U.S. report examined the official actions taken by each of the other 3 countries, with First Nations, Inuits, Métis, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islanders, and Maori tribes for the potential recommendations for the United States government. The report writes that the goal is to exchange best practices for healing and redress between federal and indigenous governments. So this country knows that it's been the villain in many people's stories, just like with slaveries and how they have treated Black people over the centuries that we have been here. What are they really going to do? Are they going to admit what they have done to people? I highly doubt it, but we can see. I mean, she submitted her report and her recommendations, so we'll see what happens with this. The next tweet thread is talking about the femicide going on in the UK. Obviously, being in the US, I do recognize that femicide is a problem here and globally, but this one is about the UK. This woman says this isn't a knife crime problem. This is a men unaliving women and girls. This is femicide. And she's responding to this person named T saying men are on a stabbing spree in the UK with women and girls the main victims, and yet nobody wants to say the quiet part out loud. So, an 11-year-old girl and a 34-year-old woman were stabbed in London's Leicester Square. Police say a man has been arrested and is in custody. Here's the article. Security guard disarms knifeman after girl 11 stabbed in Leicester Square. A 32-year-old man who is believed to not have known the victims was arrested at the scene. And this man that you see below is the person that disarmed the attacker. Abdullah, 29, said he heard a scream. Then he jumped on the man who was attacking the child before holding him down and taking the knife off him. I just saw a kid getting stabbed and I just had to save her. It is my duty to just save them. Abdullah said he and his colleague gave first aid to the child before the police arrived within 4 minutes of the attack on Monday morning. So I don't know. It just, every single day there is something. Every single day there's something. There are articles being sent out here, abroad, globally, just everywhere that women and girls are just unsafe. And for people like me, the feminists that are concerned about this and that keep reporting on this, and then you got the loud podcast bros that want to talk about relationships and masculine women and just nonsense, where they got these dudes out here flailing and being violent. It's just like we live in parallel universes, and it's just exhausting every single day. Finally, I want to end with talking about ProPublica and their reporting on Project 2025. I read through their article. They have embedded video footage of Project 2025's leaders talking about how to train these people up to be ready to launch if Trump gets into office. If there is they talk about a conservative president, but who could that really be if it is for Project 2025, as in January 2025? This is a great article. It's long and it has videos embedded as far as the links go. So go ahead and search this out. Here is the title: 14 hours of never before published videos from Project 2025's Presidential Administration Academy. They have a whole academy that is looking to train these people right now to be ready to launch. Okay, so I'm not going to do this whole article because it is long. It has links. It has very detailed information. So you would do yourself a favor to go and read it yourself. The videos are part of an ongoing effort to recruit and train thousands of future conservative appointees. Despite Donald Trump's efforts to disavow Project 2025, most of the speakers in the videos have previously worked for the former president. ProPublica and Documented obtained more than 14 hours of never before published videos from Project 2025's Presidential Administration Academy so that these people can be ready on day one. Project 2025, the controversial playbook and policy agenda created by the Heritage Foundation and its allies for a future conservative presidential administration, has lost its director. In recent weeks, it faced scathing criticism from both Democratic groups and former President Donald Trump, whose campaign has tried to distance itself from the effort. But Project 2025's plan to train an army of political appointees who could battle against the so-called deep state government bureaucracy remains on track. Video trainings like these are one of the 4 pillars of that plan, says Spencer Creatin. I'm going to jump to this part. This part was good. In a video about oversight and investigations, a group of conservative investigators advised future appointees on how to avoid creating a paper trail of sensitive communications that could be obtained by congressional committees or outside groups under the Freedom of Information Act. If you need to resolve something, if you can do it, it's probably better to walk down the hall, buttonhole the guy and say, hey, what are we going to do here? Talk through the decision, says Tom Jones, a former Senate investigator who now runs the American Accountability Foundation. Jones adds that it's possible that agency lawyers could cite exemptions in the public records law to prevent the release of certain documents, but appointees are best served, he argues, if they don't put important communications in writing in the first place. They are teaching people to get around, to circumnavigate the system, to be sneaky, to be liars ahead of time. So what does that tell you about these so-called Christians. Anyways, go ahead, join the conversation. Let me know what you think about these tweet threads. Don't forget to like, comment, and